very early on in the history, in Thomas Jefferson's action against the Barbary pirates, you had a different situation. It wasn't a declaration of war from one sovereign nation against another sovereign nation. You had the Barbary pirates operating out of the north coast of Africa, being a real nuisance. And so we took military action against the Barbary pirates, and we did that without a declaration of war. So welcome to Clown World. What I want to talk about today is declarations of war and the blowing up of narco boats. So that's been in the news recently as the president has ordered and as the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, has conducted strikes on boats full of drugs that were in international waters. So let's talk about that for a bit. There are various issues at play, obviously. The last time the United States declared war on anybody formally was in the Second World War. And the Constitution gives Congress the authority to declare war. The president sought that declaration in the Second World War, and Congress declared war. Since that time, we have been in the Korean War, which was an undeclared war. We've been in the Vietnam War, which was an undeclared war. We've been in the first Iraq War. We have been in the Afghan War. All of these wars were not declared by Congress. Some of them were authorized by Congress, which is not the same thing, because it's always possible for a congressman to say, oh, well, I voted to authorize this action, this military action, but I didn't mean that kind of action. A declaration of war, you're either for it or against it. You're either all in or you're not all in. So that's the one category. But very early on in the history, in Thomas Jefferson's action against the Barbary pirates, you had a different situation. It wasn't a declaration of war from one sovereign nation against another sovereign nation. You had the Barbary pirates operating out of the north coast of Africa, being a real nuisance to American shipping and doing all kinds of bad stuff. And so we took military action against the Barbary pirates, and we did that without a declaration of war. But that was different than the Vietnam War. The Vietnam War was a war. The Iraq War was a war, one sovereign nation against another sovereign nation, resulting in the toppling of Saddam Hussein. And if that's not a war, what is, right? So there should have been a declaration of war there, but there didn't need to be a declaration of war with the Barbary pirates. Now, I regard the situation with the drug runners as being comparable, not the same thing as, but comparable to dealing with pirates. You have people who are a big enough operation to be a nuisance to a sovereign nation like the United States, where we have to take some sort of action, but it's not worthy of a declaration of war. Now, I object. I think there's a terminology issue here. The Constitution authorizes issuing of letters of marque and reprisal. That's essentially where the government gives authorization to privatize action against bad actors. Letters of marque and reprisal could be issued authorizing people to go after pirates, for example. Pirates are a real threat, but I have an objection to calling these guys narco-terrorists. Terrorism is not what's going on, although the action being taken against them is authorized under the declaration of them being terrorists. I would rather expand the definition to say terrorists and or drug runners. That being the case, I don't see any problem if they're certain of their target with taking military action, quasi-military action against a quasi-threat to our national security. There's much more to discuss in this regard, but that's the basic outline.